I'm sitting here outside at the Arizona Center where you can hear the construction noise in the outside just to maybe talk a little bit about what assignments you have coming up this week and kind of how they connect together. It's good to sort of just have a brief little overview to that way you can see how they connect. And normally in a face-to-face course, people just talk about that really directly. So I figured I would try to replicate a little bit of that here. That last week you talked a little bit about social loafing, and that's a really important concept for you to have because that's probably one of the biggest problems that most class projects have, is that there's a lot of students who are individually very hardworking, but all of a sudden they show up in a group environment and think they're not really as accountable individually anymore, so they kind of slack off a little bit. This is the kind of issue that's going to come up in your workplaces as well, so learning to manage it and deal with it now is really important. You have a survey that's also due this week, and this is the really best way to tackle social loafing. Is that sometimes social loafers tend to think like, well, as long as nobody knows what I'm doing or nobody knows that I'm not working very hard, then I can kind of get away with it. But sometimes if they get the feedback that people notice they're not working very hard, in some cases they might be motivated to work a little bit harder. Now, knowing that you're not working very hard is not the same thing as caring about the project or the class. It's not going to eliminate everything, but to some degree when people know they're being watched, they're more likely to complete their assignments. We have a module on negotiation this week. Now, as business students, negotiation is going to be a large part of your job. The most important thing to remember about negotiation is that negotiation is really the most effective, and the most effective negotiators are people who can negotiate when they don't have some kind of leverage or power outside of the negotiation. Lots of people who are parents often say like, oh, I'm a really good negotiator with my kids, but they have a ton of power over their kids. So it's not really the same thing as negotiating with other people. So a good place to practice your negotiation is thinking about things like roommates, romantic partners, or in situations where you don't have absolute power over someone. To a large degree, negotiation is a practice thing. It's not something you're going to be able to learn to do from a single module. But one thing to really think about is your negotiating practice in this small group and as part of this project. So hopefully this little brief overview gives you some connection on how all these modules work together, and I hope to see your work pretty soon.